Yesterday, we worked on some word problems that involved least common multiple and greatest common factor. I wanted to quickly review those ideas today with a couple of examples so that you can be as successful as possible on your common problems. So remember that a least common multiple is the smallest multiple that a pair or set of numbers has in common. So for example, let's take 5 and 8. If I want to find the least common multiple of 5 and 8, well, in con, you're going to see this notation, a lowercase LCM, and they're going to have 5, 8. That just means you're finding the least common multiple between 5 and 8. So I'm going to start with 5, and I'm going to list out multiples of 5. So 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, and then I'm going to keep going. So the next one would be 20, 25, 30. I could keep going, but let me get it started on 8, and I'll see if I need to keep going. So multiples of 8, 8 times 1 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16, 8 times 3 is 24, then comes 32, and then 40. Oh, I've noticed that I made it to 40 with my multiples of 8, and I'm not quite there yet with my multiples of 5, so I'm going to keep going with my multiples of 5 and see if I can catch up to 40. So 25, 30, 35 would be the next one, and then 40. And oh, would you look at that? It looks like 5 and 8 have 40 in common. And let's just double check to make sure they don't have anything lower than 40 that's in common, and they don't. So the least common multiple between 5 and 8 is 40. Now I could keep going with my multiples of 5, and I could keep going with my multiples of 8 because they do have more common multiples. For example, 80 is a multiple of 5, and 80 is also a multiple of 8, but it is not the least common multiple. 40 is the least common multiple. It's smaller than 80. All right, let's do an example for greatest common factor. So remember that greatest common factor is the largest factor that a pair or set of numbers has in common. So in con, you're going to see this notation, lowercase GCF, of let's do, how about 32 and 40? I want to know the greatest common factor between 32 and 40. So I'm going to start with 32. And remember, factors are a pair of numbers that multiply together to get a multiple, or you can think of a factor as a number that divides the product. So numbers that divide 32 would be 1 and 32. See, 32 is also divisible by 2. So let's see, 2 times 16 would be 32. So I know 16 is also a factor. And the next one would be 3. 3 does not divide 32. Well, you could divide 32 by 3, but you wouldn't get a whole number as your answer. So 3 is not a factor of 32. 4 is a factor of 32 because 4 times 8 is 32. Let's keep going. 5 does not divide 32. Neither does 6. Neither does 7. 8 does, but we already have it on our list. So we know we've got all the factors of 32. Let's do the same thing for 40. So 1 and 40, those both divide 40. 2 and 20. Let's see, 3 doesn't divide 40. 4 divides 40. 4 and 10 are both factors of 40. Let's see, 5 and 8. See, 6 doesn't work, 7 doesn't work, 8 works. So it's already on my list, so I know I've got all the factors of 40. So we need to find the factor that these two numbers have in common that's the greatest. They both have 1 in common, but that's not the greatest. They both have 2 in common, but that's not the greatest. They both have 4 in common. That's not the greatest. They also have 8 in common. I think that might be the greatest. If I look at my other factors, there's nothing else in common that's greater than 8. So 8 is my greatest common factor between 32 and 40.